Hey everyone, hello beautiful people. I am so excited you're joining me today for an incredible conversation with someone that I believe that is going to change families and change the world with healing generational wealth. So, with the work that I do and those of you that follow me, you know that I'm so passionate about how to have families thrive. Now, one of the main stresses of family life that actually deplete us, that have causes unnecessary conflict and stress is the experience of not being provided for, not having safety with money. There's never enough. And we're feeling like there's this compromise in our life, right? Of needing to work to be able to pay the bills, to create money, or then spend time with the children, but then we're in lack. And it creates this loop, it creates this cycle. And we know that in doing this work of healing generational patterns, that lack and scarcity is a generational wound because you can have so much money and still be in scarcity and lack, right? But then the thing is this, it is a real problem to have a lack of money. So then what do you do? So, being on this journey, I asked the universe, please, is there a resource that I can share with my children to be able to create a foundation to set them up to have a healthy relationship with money? Like a healthy relationship with money, such that they're not thinking that, I can manifest money all the time and there's always a lot of it and I just can buy whatever I want, which, is amazing and fun, but, that's not a healthy relationship with money. And at the same time, I just need to save. I just need to save. I just need to save. And I'm unworthy to purchase things that are in alignment for me. I was like, how do we communicate these words to children? I can communicate these words to adults and it's quite easy, but what do we do for children? So like I said, I asked the universe, share me a resource, show me someone that has done this so that I could really create the foundation for our sons. And lo and behold, ask and you shall receive. So I came across David Delisle, who wrote this incredible book called The Golden Quest. And the moment that I read this to my son, like I had tears in my eyes, like my heart bloomed. And not only that, Avery got it. He's 6 years old. And he was like, oh, mummy, I understand now. Like money, you only need to buy the awesome stuff. And in our families, like we don't buy toys. We have a TV that's from 2008 that was given. And when we go to different families, he's like, well, why don't we have a smart TV? Why doesn't our TV connect to the internet? And why don't I have this? And why don't I have that? But the very first chapter, I read the awesome stuff to him. He goes, oh, now it makes sense why we don't have it, because to you, it's not awesome. And you're right, to me, it's not awesome. It's just, I felt like I needed it because I was embarrassed. Now, this is a 6-year-old getting this concept. And then I said to him, so Avery, how do you feel about getting a new TV? Is it this awesome or is it this awesome? He goes, well, it's really only this awesome, right? Because if I watch TV a lot, it hurts my brain. So I can't wait to have this conversation with David, to be able to share with you so that you can start creating a really powerful foundation with your children on having a healthy relationship with money. And this book needs to be in every household, okay? This book needs to be taught in schools. I mean, we all understand that the current education system doesn't teach about financial literacy, and it needs to. So I want to introduce you to David. David is, most importantly, he's a father. So he understands this. And not only that, one of the incredible things was he was like, I started investing when I was 11. I was like, when I was 11, I had no idea about money. And I'm so interested to learn from David how that trajectory has impacted his life, impacted his parenting, and the world and life that he's created. So welcome, David. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, I'm so excited. That's just listening to you talk about that. I could feel, getting the chills and chills and feel that through, because it is so important. And I love that Avery got that message. And that's what I really found through this whole thing is sort of to sum up what you're saying is that when we think about money, the first thing and almost the only thing we think about and are learned and taught and teach is this idea of how to have more.
Yeah.
And it's not like that's a bad lesson. Like you
Mm.
said, there is scarcity, we do want more, but we're never taught why we want more in the first place. And to
Yeah.
me, that's the most important lesson and the one that needs to come first. And if that lesson never comes first, that's when we get caught up in just every time we achieve any amount of wealth, then the only thing, if we've been taught, is how to have more, then we're wondering what the next step is. What's the next level? Where do we go from here? What's next? Rather than this idea of why do you want it in the first place? And I love that this idea of the awesome stuff, a 6-year-old could get it. I see on the chat, bought it for the 4-year-old twins, like a 4-year-old could get it. I tried to simplify it in such a way that I was actually writing it for adults, but how can I
Mm.
distill this so, a child gets it? So then when they're in the store and they're, begging for that ice cream or that toy, rather than as a parent having to say like, no, we can't do it for this reason or whatever we say, we just we just put it back to them. Is that your
Mm.
awesome stuff? And let
Yeah.
them reflect. And then I have parents, well, what if they still want the ice cream? It really doesn't matter. It's that pausing and reflecting. Like that is everything. Like you said with Avery, as soon as he paused and reflected, he realized, oh, I really don't need this smart TV. Now, if he said, no, I really want it for this reason or this reason, it would change my life,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the pausing and reflecting. We just don't do that and ask ourselves why. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of this whole thing. And if kids can get it, if someone like Avery can carry that from now, age 6, all the way through his life, it just extrapolates into everything. It's not just things anymore. It's job, friendships,
Yes.
travel, it's everything. Is this my awesome stuff? So
Oh, that's so powerful. David, can you tell us, like, why did you write this book? Like, what inspired you to write this book?
So, and that's a bit of a journey itself. As you mentioned, so I'm a father. I've got
Yeah.
2 boys. They're 13 and 10. But I've been writing this. It took longer than I expected to sort of get the whole thing put together. So it's been 3 years or so now that I've been in this process. So my boys were much younger then, and they were at an age where I thought there's just things that I want to pass down to them, or
Yeah.
just have them know. Or if something happened at the time, I was sort of thinking of a book I'd read called The Last Lecture, where some life lessons are
Yes.
passed on to,
I love that book.
his young
Yeah.
son. Yeah. And I hadn't, it wasn't that I just read it. It just all of a sudden, as the boys are getting older, it popped back in my mind, like what would I want to pass down to my boys?
Mm.
And as I was writing down a lot of the things, I noticed that my philosophy around money kept coming up because it's a little bit different. And so then I started just writing, this book for kids about money, but it was a boring book about money for kids because most people don't like learning about this stuff.
Yeah.
And then I was volunteering in my kids' son's library and watching these kids reading these graphic novels and just devouring these things and how much
Yeah.
they've changed from when we were children. And it was almost instantaneous, this whole concept of how beautiful it'd be to have like this illustrated adventure. Kids would get, money would be the theme, but not the main method of passing on this information. It would just be a fun adventure where the money fades into the background and
Yeah.
teach these lessons. And that's where it started to evolve. But even then, it's really been conversations with parents and kids and some of these other things where it's actually landed a lot more as it's grown in scope through this whole process. And to be honest, a lot of the stuff I almost feel sort of like Liz Gilbert talks in like Big Magic. Like some of these things I think just they were out there, they came, I
Yeah.
became a vessel to share this information, but I actually don't even feel like it's my idea. This is just,
Mm.
I'm just putting it out in the world that this is a message that needed to be shared. Um, and it sort of feels like some of these things, especially the concept around the awesome stuff, it's
Yeah.
one of those things that just, it was something that needed to be shared. I've never referred to the awesome stuff prior to this book. This wasn't
Right.
like something that I had thought about or lived my life by. Like, I mean, it was there, the seeds were there, but it was something that needed to be shared and didn't necessarily come from me. So
Amazing. I love that. You're speaking my language being a vessel. So I'm curious, David, you said that you started investing since you were 11. Can you share about what you were taught about money growing up, or how you witnessed your parents around money? What was that like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because me and my dad, we disagreed about money right up until he passed away. Like we never agreed, and he saw it differently than I did.
Mm,
And I didn't realize it's been actually these conversations as well that have caused me to reflect a bit more on it. But he was of the mindset of, you work hard, work's
mm,
not fun, you do what you can, you pay for everything in cash and spend everything you have. And money was just something you worked hard for and then spent. Sort of
yeah,
like you said, you're like you spend, he didn't even save. It was just you earn. He was a hard earner and he was a hard spender, but he was miserable. He hated his job.
yeah,
He was never happy working. And so it must have sunk in that I was like, it seems like there's got to be a better way.
yeah,
And then when I found out things about like interest or investing or that money actually could create money,
yeah,
and I was like, I don't want to feel like I have to work doing something I hate and be miserable.
mm,
And so I was a bit of a saver and I was reading finance books. And I remember reading, I mean, there's a book that was really popular in Canada at the time called The Wealthy Barber by David Chilton. I remember being, 11 or 12 when that book came out
wow,
and going, seeing him on his book tour. And again, this was written as a story of
yeah,
just compound interest. And even that, the concept of compound interest, I remember just being blown away with, especially as a young kid, because you have nothing but time on your hands. If you're like, if 10 years it could grow to this, or 20 years it could grow to that,
yeah,
I'll still be young and retired.
yeah,
So that's sort of how it happened. But again, like I said, my family was not the same. Money was not a tool. They saw it as you spent,
yeah,
you earned, and that was it. And it's a harder way to go and a harder life. And my dad did not love his work. And
yeah,
that's a bit of a shame. So even in the book, I wanted to be careful that I didn't emphasize this idea of just creating wealth so you don't have to work.
yeah,
For many, what they love is their job,
mm,
but it's a choice. It's not, for just as many, what they want is not to work. So it's like taking that judgment out of money altogether.
yeah.
But for my dad, he worked because he had to and he hated it. So that seemed to stick at a young age.
That is so powerful you said that, because I know that's the last tip of the book, right? So in this book, and I'm going to ask David to touch on the 5 points that he shares in the book. But before I do that, the very last point was like, we do this stuff with money with the intention for freedom and freedom of choice, right? That was so powerful. Can you share more about that? It was exactly what you said, where
Yeah.
it's like you choose a job because you love it, because it's the expression of you, versus I have to do this.
Yeah. Well, we again, back to that concept of we're always taught about more for money, and that's all we're
Yeah.
taught, not the why. And so because of that, it doesn't really matter where we are in terms of how much money or how little. Money is very top of mind for many of us. So in
Yeah.
all our decisions and what we're doing, even if we have a lot, I mean, it doesn't matter. We see billionaires still striving for more because that's all they know. So money is very top of mind. So even these people with, like I said, millions or billions, they're still very aware of earning more, creating more, having more. And so money's there. And that's just so much headspace. So I don't mention in the book and I don't mention it on the back of it, but I do mention in these conversations that what my hope is
Mm,
that money over time, by following these rules and figure out what's important to you and following some habits so your money grows, your wealth is at a point where you're not stressed having to earn,
yeah.
that money stops being top of mind and no longer becomes a factor in decisions. And the factor is, you start pursuing, what do I love, what's my awesome stuff.
Mm,
And that really, that to me is freedom, not a specific amount of money,
yeah.
not, if I could only have this mansion or travel to these places. It's when money stops having that hold because your decisions are no longer dictated by money in general.
And for
That's
me,
the freedom.
Yeah. And for me, that is such a special point, because when money is no longer top of mind and we can feel safety and we don't need to make more and more and more, that's when parents become present, right? That
Yes.
for me, right? And we say that we want to be better parents, we want to be more present, we want to be more patient, but when this is sucking our energy, it is really, really hard. And so I believe that I think modern society is havoc on families, right?
It's well, and that's the reason this is so important. Is I caught myself in that as well. Like, so as a young age, because I was interested in this stuff, I
Mm,
remember thinking, if once I had like, I wanted to retire, so I didn't have to work like my dad. So if once I have $1 million, I can retire and not have to work
yeah,
and do what I want. And so I had these goals in mind, like maybe by 20 or 30, I could save and earn this and do that. And then I don't have to work and then I could do whatever I want. But I found it didn't matter what I achieved.
mm,
It was okay. Well, I still didn't have enough. There was still like, okay, well, once I get a little bit more, then, because sure, I have 1 million, but now I can't, I'd love to travel more. Maybe I'd want to fly this way or eat this way or have a little less worry. And I noticed that needle never stopped moving.
yeah,
And so I was like, I need, like, why is that? And unless you start breaking that to what you want to do, it doesn't break. And like you said about being present with parents, it's all relative. I see parents with very little, and I see parents with, millions, tens of millions, still feeling like and then they'll never say, I'll never get there and be present. It's always just, I just need a few more years to achieve this. And then
that's
once I'm
right.
there, but what
Yeah,
you realize is that few more years never happens. It
yeah,
continually gets pushed out. And that's where what is important? Is it being home? Is it traveling? Is it the area you live in? Is it education? Once you realize, and again, taking out the judgment. So everyone's going
yeah,
to have something different that's important to them. Even with this book, I'm finding sharing it and the impact is so important to me. It takes time away from my kids, but that's a choice. I want to make that choice, and I'm still very present with my boys, but
mm,
it's a choice. I know, I'm aware of the choice I'm making, and
yeah,
that's the whole thing, is being aware of the choice allows you to choose what you want. Not everyone's going to choose the same thing, but allows you to choose what you want.
mm,
And that's really the piece. And so back to this long arc, but I love that in the book that the child, it is this hero's journey. So he starts out
yeah,
thinking of all he's going to buy, how much money he's going to have,
yeah,
all this wealth, and it comes full circle to like, that's not what you're after at all. What are
mm,
you after? But it doesn't tell him what he's after. It's, you have to figure that out yourself. So
mm. I love that. So let's get into the book. What can you share a bit about, the 5 key teachings that are in this book, and how you distilled a pretty complicated concept on how to create a relationship to money in like 5 simple steps. And I mean, I really do believe, like, even for adults, you nail these 5 things and your relationship to money is healed. So
yeah.
how did you come up with that, David? And you can share the five as well.
Yeah, I'll share the five. And really, there's only four. There was originally going to be five. There's
Yeah.
four, and I wrap it up with just a summary.
Yeah.
It was tricky because again, I read these books when I was 11. So I mean, I could rattle off stuff all day long about
Mm,
like how to invest, where to invest, what to do, what's good, what's bad. But I realized looking back how much really didn't matter. So these big things, like when people are, what do different stock pickers say, or should I invest in Bitcoin, or is Tesla a good buy, or what's happening with the currency rates, like
yeah.
that stuff isn't as important as creating healthy habits
Yeah.
and mindset. So I try to think like what were the big needle movers? Like even looking at my choices, like I've made some really good choices, but a lot of times if I strip that out, those good decisions I made took a lot of headspace and were a
Mm,
lot more complicated than they maybe had to be. So what really is important? And that's what I try to do is figure out how to make it really important. And then because it's a graphic novel, I couldn't elaborate. Like I couldn't do a 2-page or 3-page sort
yeah.
of description or illustration. I had to simplify it. So I try to just think of like what really is it. Like if, and same like you said, for an adult, if they nailed this,
Mm,
this is 95% of what is important in creating wealth, period.
yeah.
And the 5% really is, semantics. It doesn't really matter. So the first one, which again, I think is the most important, is this idea of only buy the awesome stuff.
Mm,
But that whole concept is really getting clear on what's important to you,
yeah.
what's your awesome stuff. And I try to get that for the kids and adults as well, because especially as adults, we don't really know our awesome stuff. We might think
Mm,
we know our awesome stuff, but really what we're used to thinking of is what we're planning to buy yet, like next, or what we want.
yeah.
But you notice it. So the awesome stuff, like if you don't feel it in your body and you're not smiling when you're talking about
Yeah.
it and you just can't stop, it's not your awesome stuff.
Yeah.
And that is a journey in itself. That's something that evolves and changes over time. So Avery, what his awesome stuff is today will change and evolve over time.
Mm,
But just knowing to be aware of what your awesome stuff is, again, that's the trick. So then now all of a sudden something else he experiences, like, wait a sec, like this, going to swim with my friends, I had way more fun than anything else. And all of a sudden that becomes the new sort of baseline of, that's, if it's not better than that, it's not my awesome stuff.
yes.
So that's where it just starts being this journey where you just
Yeah.
continue to up level with where you feel it in your body, where you get excited. So I spend a lot of time on that, because that's key. Like you said,
Mm,
Avery, wondering why we don't have this TV. You need to understand why, because if you don't
yes.
understand why, the rest doesn't fall into place.
Yeah.
So that's the first
Yeah.
lesson. Second lesson is always save first.
Yeah.
And that's this idea. I mean, you can't create wealth without saving. We all know that, but saving is tricky. And so we've always been told, like, create a habit out of it, save before, pay yourself first, or save first, or put your money aside before you spend it. You can't, well, most of us can't budget. We can't save afterwards because we spend what we have. So the save first is trying to create that habit. And the reason the habit's so important is because if it's a habit,
Mm,
then we don't think about it. So the same way I was talking about, well, money doesn't become something we think about. That's the goal I'm trying to create for everyone, including myself. The saving first, we spend what we have. So by saving first, we'll get used to that habit. It won't be immediate, but you'll be surprised by how quickly you don't notice that money. Just
mm,
as, if suddenly if I gave you $1 million, you would find a way to spend it and not know where it even went. But if you save first, at least a portion, the rest doesn't matter. The path to wealth has started.
mm,
And then the third lesson is send your money to work
mm,
today. And that's the compound interest, and that's the investing, because saving will grow, but compound interest, we don't realize how powerful it is. So if you
yeah.
take a round number like the stock market at 10% returns, don't use that number as a guarantee, but based on that, money's doubling every 7 years.
Yeah.
And that might not sound like a lot the first 7 years, but as it compounds, it grows and it grows and it grows. And that exponential growth becomes incredible. So if you think of someone like a Warren Buffett, who
Yeah.
has, a billionaire, if he was able to just take that and get a regular 10% return in the stock market, which it's returned, over its lifetime,
Mm,
someone like him doing nothing else in 7 years would have twice the wealth and accumulate more than all of his previous good investments, all the work he's done, everything that's happened. He would create more in the next 7 years than all of that combined. Like, that's powerful.
yeah.
So teaching that the kids understand, and because that also drives the motivation behind the saving.
Mm,
Saving a dollar that's going to be worth a dollar 100 years from now doesn't have the same impact as saving a dollar that'll be worth, $100 in your lifetime. So
yeah. I just want to like
that's,
yeah, that's so cool,
oh,
David.
go
Something to
ahead.
cut you off. But like I just like, for the first three steps, like the awesome stuff is almost teaching you to know what is true to you, right? And what is true to you is going to change, right? And the second lesson is delayed gratification. And I think these habits aren't just to do with money, it's to do with life. And if we can actually go, well, I'm going to save this to invest in something in the future, that delayed gratification is so key, especially in relationships, right? Especially when you're a parent and you're rushing your children to grow beyond what is in their innate nature because you have a projection or a fear that they're falling behind. So even that second step of like saving with the energy of delayed gratification, like that's powerful to teach, right? And
Well, and pairing it with the habit. So as you talk about
yes,
relationships, like we never have enough time for our kids. We just don't. But if there's the habit, okay, every morning, this is what we do together as a
yeah,
family, or every weekend, this is what we do together as a family, or when I do the pickup, this is what we do. You build those habits in,
yeah,
then it's always there. But if you're
yes,
just like, oh, eventually we're going to go to the beach someday, or eventually we'll, sit as a family and read a book. Like if you don't build those habits, it's almost impossible for them to happen. But if you know that's important, that every night you read, then every night you read. So
yes, so good. So good because like, we do a lot of what's urgent and not what's important. And we
mhm.
prioritize what is others and not what is in alignment to us. Like, so this book is like gold. So then there's the awesome stuff, delayed gratification, the eighth wonder of the world, which is compound interest. Please do continue sharing the
Yeah.
next.
And the fourth, and really there's only four golden rules. Just so the fourth rule is
Mm,
give and you'll have more.
yeah,
And what I really try to do with this, especially kids now, like they're starting to understand um, contribution and they're getting some of that and charity. But I want to show that there's a power to it as well that comes back. So it's not just outward giving, giving, giving until you're depleted. It creates energy in itself and it comes back. And I tried to illustrate a nice way where, a 5-year-old could get this concept and see real time how
yeah,
this person gives, and they not only become richer, but the whole village they're in becomes richer. And it is financial as
mm,
well as other. So it's a, you could use it as a metaphor where it isn't literal, where given you'll have more is open-ended. More itself is open-ended on
yeah,
how you interpret more, but it will come in all these other ways. So just that idea, and with that comes back to the mindset, because when you talk about lack,
mm,
again, I don't illustrate it in the book. I illustrate it in just like a throwaway where the seed's there, but the girl talks about, I felt richer.
yeah,
And this idea of lack, like it's very difficult to feel lack or feel poor or feel like you need or want more, be on that, be in that position. If you're giving, it's very hard to feel
yeah,
that lack. Like that's the antidote right there to lack, which is why, again, it sort of comes full circle. It starts with this mindset of what's important to you. You start setting up the habits so your wealth accumulates,
mm,
and then so that you don't feel like you're just saving, because that's what happens. We start feeling
yeah,
saving, but we're like, we're doing a good thing, but I don't like it.
yeah,
That takes away that feeling like lack, and you're doing without because you're now giving.
yeah. So I know I keep saying the fifth thing, but I know that the fifth thing is the result of it. And I think time is like we all have 86,400 seconds each and every day. You like it's not, you can't have more, I can't have less. Like we all have 86,400 seconds every single day. And I love how you illustrated this, and I shouldn't call it the fifth point, but like time is our most precious commodity. Money can't buy it, and it's finite, right? Can you share more about this? Like, because when you wrapped it up in the book with this last concept, like it really moved me.
Yeah, I love that, because that was the trickiest rule for me to come up with. That was supposed to be a fifth rule, and that was always the concept. And I was really trying to figure out how to get this fifth rule just right, because I wanted to talk about like freedom and time and these
Yeah.
things, or even retirement, but these concepts were elusive for a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
And I found I couldn't wrap it in a bow where it didn't sound right because these other ones are action items. Whereas
Yeah.
this fifth one's like a feeling. And so it really clicked when I was working with someone. They're like, why don't you have just the four? And this is the result. Because what happens is people want, I wish I could, win $1 million. If I wish I could have this, I wish I could have that. And if only, and the goal is this amount of money so that they can buy anything they want. But the book isn't about buying whatever you want. So I want to show this journey where the kids at the end of this journey, and this is written as like this hero's journey where he starts at the beginning thinking he's going to buy whatever he wants and gets to the end and he's a little confused, like, why am I even following these rules? What's the whole point of it?
Yeah.
And that's where it comes to the difference between like the way my dad thought about money, where
Mm.
you earn it and spend it, to where money actually does, it is a tool and it can create wealth. And money itself can create money. And
Yes.
that takes the burden off you to create that money. And I want to illustrate that. Like the money isn't so you could buy whatever you want, it's
Mm.
so it can take the burden off you to earn it.
So
So then
powerful.
you have, and then you have the freedom to figure out what you
Yeah.
want. And it's interesting. I'm working on it now. It was supposed to be in the book originally, but the illustration didn't work quite right. And I needed to get that book out because I've been working on it for 3 years. So I knew it would never be right if I didn't get it out.
Yeah.
But I did want to have, and I'm planning to add this in the reprint, is that message landing at that end, and the boy tearing up because the message hits at such a level where it's like, like this is,
Mm.
that to me was the most important message, because that's the whole point of the book. Is it's not about more, it's about this freedom to figure out what do you love and be able to pursue it, because money is important. We are all wrapped
Yeah.
up in it, and it takes all that headspace. And I want to just show a way where that we're not wrapped up in this consumerist culture where all we think about is money, and instead we can start thinking about relationships, or you
Mm.
know community, or contribution, whatever it might be, and just get our heads outside of this mindset of just thinking about money.
Cool. So before I go, I have one more question with you, David. How do you how do you share this wisdom in your own family and with your own boys? And how has that journey been?
It's interesting because a large part of it is just getting rid of the judgment. So my boys
Yeah.
are completely different, and how they view money is different, and how they spend
Yeah.
money. And some of it's just personality because they're different boys. But I actually do think some of it as well is age. So when I started the book, I would use them
Yeah.
as like sounding boards, like what resonates, what doesn't, what do you get? And I'd try to, just throw things their way to see what resonated. So if you think about that, so my younger son, he would have only been about 7 at the time.
Yeah.
So around Avery's age, maybe even 6. Whereas my older one was around 10. And that difference alone, in terms of how their views had already been starting to establish, like I think
Yep.
there's a difference just with that, even though they'd be different regardless. I think starting early does make a big difference.
Mm.
And then I try to just take a lot of that judgment. Like even right now, my older son, like he's worried because he loves stuff, like, and he's into things, and he's got a lot of awesome stuff because he's got a lot of passions, but
Yeah.
they're expensive passions that burn out. He's into aquariums. He was into trains, he's into models, like all these expensive things
Yeah.
that he just gets passionate, dives into, and then wants to move on from. So he's always spending money. He doesn't have any money. So he worries, but that's where I lean him back to the habits. Like, don't
Yeah.
worry, you follow the habits, you follow the
Mm.
saving and the compound, you will create wealth. You don't have to worry so much about lack. Do that and you'll create wealth. That's going to happen. And then this idea of the awesome stuff, really what happens is because we're talking about it, we start recognizing what's important to different people in the family. What is their awesome stuff? Awesome stuff as a family, like we have stuff that as a family we consider awesome, but also individually, and trying very hard to take that judgment, because you can see like, oh, don't waste your money on that, or why'd you buy that, and oh that,
Yeah.
but taking that judgment out and trying to be like, no, like if that's your awesome stuff, that's your awesome stuff, and don't feel shame around it. So
Mm.
I haven't really pushed very hard with you have to do this. This is how you earn. Here's your stocks. Like they do have their own investments. They are watching the stock market. They do savings.
Wow.
But,
Yeah.
but really, it's just talking about it more than anything.
Mm.
So one of my favorite things I like to talk about, especially with young kids, so parents with young kids, is just talking about money. Because you talk about like
Yeah.
this, generational trauma. It's because we don't know about money.
Yeah.
So we always want our kids to be good with their money and understand the value of a dollar and not wasteful with money and appreciate it. And that's what we say, but then we never talk about money.
Yeah.
So for a child to understand like that they should appreciate a meal or an amusement park admission or whatever it is, if they don't know the cost of it or how much other things cost, it just doesn't make sense to them. So when I say talk about money, actually talking about the cost of things and not in a way of like guilt, like I spent this much on you, but so
Yeah.
they understand the value. So that ice cream cone is the same as, that toy car, or, that Lego set is the same as, that video game. And so once they start seeing the value of money,
Yeah.
then they can make decisions. Then they start to see, well, why would I spend so much money on that ice cream when I'd rather have this, or vice versa, and just starting to talk about it. So with young kids, so what I used to do when my guys were really little and they didn't get this, is they really did like things like chocolate bars they can understand,
Yeah.
these little Lego sets they could. So when they wanted to buy something, I could say, that's 3 chocolate bars, or that's 1 Lego set. And so even when they're young, they could start to get this idea of like how much things actually cost. So
Yeah.
when they wanted a teddy bear, they wouldn't know that that was like some collectible that was a $2,000 collectible teddy bear, or a $5 thrift shop teddy bear. They don't know the difference. So
Yeah.
if you could start telling them, then they get it, and then they can understand, well, I want this one or I want that one, this makes sense, and they start seeing the value. So that for sure I've tried to do with them. So they're very well aware of even how much our home costs or our cars cost or what we
Mm.
earn. Like, and that came more like maybe the younger one who's 10, not so much, but definitely the 13-year-old is starting to become more aware. And I say, like, this isn't to tell your friends, it isn't
Yeah.
to have judgment, it's just to be aware. So when we do a family trip, this is how much that trip costs. When we do a dinner, this is how much the dinner costs. So they can start appreciating the value that we're spending, and then knowing that this is a value of our family, like this is an important thing for us and why.
Mm.
But otherwise they can't know. Like a trip to Disneyland has no, it means nothing to them if they don't
Yeah.
understand what it took to buy that trip, and like like what you could spend that money on otherwise, or how hard you had to work to earn the money to go on that trip. If they don't understand, they don't understand. So that just
Yeah.
talking about it takes away that whole taboo. So that's more than anything that I try to do with the boys.
That's so powerful. So can I ask you, I know that was supposed to be my last question. I was going to open up the floor, but I just got one more question. So then, I have this thing about trading time for money, right? Like I don't want, that's one of the things that we don't want our boys to take on, which we inherited, like trading time for money. And so, we haven't known how to be able to, and the boys receive money as gifts, right? And so we're at this stage is like, how do we break free from the trading time for money thing. So safer, but then also teach them how to earn money. So one of the things is we originally ages ago we were like, well, if you do this, then we'll give you money. But I'm like, well, that's kind of trading time for money, and I don't want to instill that in them. So do you have any tips around that?
Well, and I mean, if I go back to the book, that's
Mm.
where the boy's wondering what this is all about. And just that idea that money can earn money. So
Mhm.
that picture of money going to work, they see that there's another way. So that's because in the beginning, you do have to trade time for money.
Okay.
Like
Yep.
that's the thing. Like how do you earn money? You have to give something of yourself to get
Yeah.
that back. And so that's why in the book, like in the beginning, you do have to work to earn money, or
Mhm.
most of us do.
Yeah.
And so that's something we're used to. But if you know that it's in the beginning and that money saved and invested can create money, then all of a sudden you see that wealth being created. And I know right now we have this whole idea of like this gig economy or hustle economy or having a second job or all these different, passive income.
Mm,
It doesn't have to be that complicated. If
mm,
you know, traditionally, all the wealth in our country was created through investing,
yeah.
not through, these concepts we're trying to create now. It was, you invest in like a business or a stock market, you take that money and it just earns money for you. And so just learning that concept, that's how they can start seeing that that can be there. But then at the same time, recognize that earning or creating isn't a bad thing.
Mm,
It's just not the only way. There is
yeah.
another way. And if you don't have those savings creating money, then again, you've lost some freedom because now you have to trade time for money. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
stuck, you have no option unless you start that process of saving first, then sending the money to work, and then letting compound interest grow. If you don't do those things, you always will be trading time for money.
So powerful. This is so great, David. Thanks for that tip. So I'm going to open the floor up. I know we've got some people that have joined us live. Does anyone have any questions for David? And I'm also going to check Facebook to see if anyone's got any questions for you live as well. And feel free to unmute yourself. Yeah, go Tui.
This is interesting because we just had a conversation with our two kids, 15 and 13. I also have a 7 and a 5-year-old, which I haven't really instill anything in them because I thought they were super young to understand the concept. But your tips are helpful, and I think the book would be very helpful to kind of get them thinking about it. But the conversation that we had with the two kids was when they were younger, we had this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule because they always get money as in a form of gifts for Christmas or their birthdays or Chinese New Year. And we have such a big family that when, on those occasions, they would get so much. And I feel like they have no concept of money and they don't know how to save. And so we started with, okay, 1/3 we put away. So we save. And 1/3 you can spend, but it has to be, like once you spend it, it's gone, right? And then 1/3 is like, I think travel money or fun money or something like that. And then we let it go for so long. I don't remember what happened. Like things just get busy with more kids or so, and then the move. And then recently, as they get older, they want to buy things for themselves. And so they're like, and then my husband has a business. So they're like, Dad, can we start working to earn money? So they get like $10 an hour, right? And then I told Sam, my husband, I was like, oh my gosh, we need to reestablish those rules because I don't want them to be shocked when they go in the world and like they get taxed, right? And so we reintroduced the concept and we said, yep, that 1/3 that you put away is actually tax money. You don't get to see that and you don't get to spend it. It's gone. And they were so shocked. And it's like, how could you take our money? And they literally was crying. They thought it was the coolest thing, right? It was so cool. And I'm like, I know it's terrible, but that's what happened. That goes into paying for the house and the food and all the things. Anyway, so I was trying to be like as neutral and as understanding of like their emotion and stuff. My husband, on the other hand, was so hurt. Like, how could you spring this on them? I was like, hey, they're 15 and 13. They need to understand this concept. But anyways, so my question is, how do you introduce that concept of taxes and also making them more fiscally responsible gently, I guess, like they say, like what is the small steps that you take versus like we just spring it on them. And then, but the nice thing about it, after that talk, they like get resourceful and they thought about like, how many hours do I have to work now? Because now I get taxed because this is the amount that I want because there's this specific things that they need. So the second day was not so bad, but the first day they took it really rough, and my husband was like having a hard time. So I feel like I need a better strategy.
Well, I would go with the concept of what it like. I wouldn't worry so much about the tax, because a lot of times the way tax comes, most people don't have to ever pay the tax because it comes off the top, so they never see it. So usually we don't have to save for the tax. Like, that's a reality. We're just not aware that it's happening. But I would be more concerned about them making the choice to put it aside. So that idea of saving first, because that will create the wealth, and showing them why. So every time something comes in, we're going to take this amount and save it before we do anything else. This is still yours, but this is where, just we were talking, this is where you no longer have to work for your money. This is going to create that wealth that creates the money for you. So we'll start that habit. And just as you notice, that's the whole, and that's what I say about these habits. That first day sucks, because you're like, where'd all my money go? What just happened? But the second day already, they're like, okay, well, this is the reality. How do we work around it? Now we got to earn more. And they've already forgotten that you're taking a third. They just know that it's happening. And that's the beauty, is learning that habit. But I try to do it in a way where they want to save that 1/3, and why they're doing that 1/3. Because what's going to happen is when they get, they're 20 and they're earning their own income and they're doing their own thing, ideally they'd carry that habit and they'd save that 1/3 themselves when you're not there to take it from them.
Would you let them see the amount on their account, like their investment account, so that they can track it?
If they want, and some kids are super curious and they'll track it, it won't grow very fast at first and they won't be very excited. And ideally, they don't even think about it. Like, that's like, ideally it would just be gone and done. And maybe you track it and all of a sudden show them, like, a year later, look how much money you have. And not only that, this money actually earned a little bit more than what was put in there, even if it's in just a bank account, or it's going to earn some interest, or if it was an investment or whatever it was doing. Just that idea that this money that you thought, like, do you even remember what you spent your other money on? What, look around the house, what do you have? What's there that you want, or you wish you had bought, versus this big lump sum that's sitting here a year later, and then the next year it's twice as big, or whatever it might be. But try to make it so it, like, instill that habit. But I talk about that habit. If this is what we're going to do, automatically get in the habit of doing this. And then kids love too, if you talk about yourself, like, I wish I did this when I was 20, because if I did, I would have had so much more just money that was sitting around. And it's easy. Like, watch how easy it is. If we take a third, you don't even notice it. You still get to buy all your things. You're still doing all your stuff. You didn't even notice it. I wish I had done this, because if I did, if they're saving a third, that's a lot. If they're saving 20%, depending on where it's invested, probably within 20 years, that money's earning more than they are. So back to that idea of, like, spending your time you're trading time for money. 20 years, you're no longer doing that, or no longer have to do that. That's huge. That's big. So teaching them that that's why you're doing this, not because I'm bad and I'm taking all your money. It's no, I wish I did this, so my money was earning more than I am by the time I was 40.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for a great question, Kui. I think Marie has a question as well. So Marie, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you. So growing up, I always hear my parents saying, money doesn't grow on trees. We don't have money, etc. And so 2 questions I have. I want my kids, I have 4-year-old twins now, and I want them to not have bad associations with money as like me when they grow up. So what's the best way to instill this good money mindsets to our young children? That's the first question. And the second question will be, I really want to start investing for our twins who are now 4-year-old with this idea of compound interest, because I didn't start early and I wish I started early. So what would you recommend? Like, is it index funds is better, or stocks, whichever? But those are my two questions, if it's possible to address them.
Yeah,
Thank you.
for sure. So I mean, the mindset stuff, the biggest thing is judgment. Like, that's what I'm trying to change. So even I see it even in our finance books. There's a lot of judgment because we view people with more money differently than people with less money. And we view expensive things as different than things that are not expensive. So just trying to get rid of judgment altogether, where, money itself doesn't dictate good or bad. That's one. So it wouldn't be like, oh, must be lucky to be them, or I wish I had this, or they must be better, or it's hard, but just trying to break that idea of money dictating happiness or something being better. Like, it's that judgment piece is big. So like I said, I catch, and you'll catch yourself as a parent doing it all the time, because it's hard, because our kids will make stupid choices. So they'll go and buy something that we're like, no, like, that's the stupidest thing to buy. But at the same time, watch the joy they have with some of these things and recognize, like, oh, that's not, I would never do that. But that stupid little, wall crawler sticky thing that will just crawl down a window and it's worth 10 cents. You spent like 2 weeks just like throwing it on the wall and having a good time, and then building forts around it or whatever, like whatever it might be. Same with stuffies. Like, it's not my thing, but the amount of joy my youngest son gets out of like his stuffed animals, and he talks to them and he has them and he sets them all up. Like, it's trying to just allow, like, hey, if that's your thing, that's your thing. But then recognizing, oh, that thing you really liked that isn't even opened in the box, or it's, still in your closet, I've never seen you with it. Like, just pointing out, maybe that wasn't your awesome stuff. But the judgment piece, that's a big part. And catching in ourselves too as adults. Like, if we see someone, like, oh, they must, thinking of someone different, but because of what they drive or what they wear or what their job is, or just catching ourselves with judgment around money. That's a big one. And the second question, the investing. So it's funny. So in the book, out of any chapters in the book where I get the most sort of negative response, is the chapter on investing, because we have so much feeling wrapped up in investing and money in general. So many people they think it's reckless to teach kids that compound interest even exists because they might lose all their money. Or others that, it's so easy. Why make it sound like something that's tricky to understand all the nuances and the, everything around it? And people are asking, like, index funds or not. Like, I love index funds, but I don't talk about that in the book, because really what I'm trying to get across, the most important thing, and this isn't just for kids, this is for adults as well. First thing that's really important is that compound interest does exist, and just how powerful that is, because we don't understand it. Like, even myself, it's hard to envision how quick some of this growth happens. So just showing that it exists and how fast it grows, because that's the thing, is we don't realize that saving money, it would take forever to save money to create some of the wealth that exists in the world without compound growth. It just would. So understanding that power is what I'm trying to illustrate. And then second, that investing can be easy and isn't intimidating, because many of us are intimidated. So we feel like we have to know all the answers and where to invest and what to do and what's best. And then we freeze because it's just too overwhelming. So that's why, rather than teaching all the nuances of how to invest, because those things exist if you really care to learn it, teaching you that it's same as, with a car that breaks down. Some people can fix the car on their own, but most of us will just go to a mechanic and find someone to fix it for us. In the same way with money, knowing that professionals exist that can invest your money and they can be a source and can be an easy source, just knowing that is more important than the nuances. And then once you find someone, then you can start asking more questions and then figure out, well, why would I go with you when I could go with this other person? Or how do you invest differently? And you start learning the same way as, there's good mechanics and there's bad mechanics. And you start learning more and asking questions, seeing what's happening. It's just that idea that it doesn't have to be overwhelming and you don't have to do it if you don't want to. I think those two lessons around investing are the most important, because you'll find as well, most people who invest, and this is because I love this stuff, if I start asking, well, what are you invested in? What are your stocks? What do you think about the economy? What are the interest rates? Are you mostly, in, stocks or bonds or real estate? Most people don't actually know. They know that they give their money to someone and they invest it for them. But the details for most people, they don't know. And the reality is, it's great to know. I love to know, and I could read up on the stuff all day long, but you don't have to know. Like that's not the difference between creating wealth or not. The habit of saving in the first place, that's more important than any of that.
Wow, thank you so much. Pure gem.
That's amazing.
Great question.
Do we have any other questions? I'm just looking at the Facebook to see if there's any questions. People are loving this. Thank you so much, David. I mean, so far, I'm just going to summarize what I got. Lose a judgment around money, especially when your child is buying something that you think is like, oh my gosh, I would not spend that. But this is about them owning their awesome stuff. Right. So that was really, really cool. Creating these habits. It's all about the habits. So that's really, really powerful. And start talking about money. You're so right. It's like, and I say the same around relationships. It's like we assume that we all know how to love, or we assume that we all know how to be in a relationship, but then no one's talking about it as you grow up. And then you go out into the world, you start dating, you go get to marriage, and you're like, oh my gosh, shouldn't I know how to love? Or shouldn't I know how to communicate? And it's the same thing with money, right? It's like we assume that our children should grow up knowing how to have a great relationship with money, but yet no one's talking about it. And this assumption just gets passed on from generation to generation. So that was really, really great, because that's something that we can definitely take on more in our family, which is like talk about money. And yeah, those are the three things I got from the questions that were asked. Joanna, did you have any questions for David?
Sorry to jump in real quick with that, because the whole topic's breaking these generational, really our generational relationship and lack and all these things with money.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is how with anything, it's not just money, talking about it.
Yeah.
Like that, bringing it out into the open, that's how we break the patterns.
Yeah.
As soon as we, sweep it under the carpet, we can't change any patterns. And you're talking about relationships, we don't talk about, but money is actually more taboo than anything. Yeah. So if you think of like your best friend, that you probably know a lot about your best friend.
Yeah.
That's just you and her, or you and him, super personal, super private. You know everything. You probably don't know how much they earn. You probably don't know how much they spent in their home. You don't probably know what their debt is. You know all these other things, but you don't know about money. And so bringing that out into the open, that's how we really start to, break these patterns that we've created for generations. So
so powerful. I love that tip. Joanna, you go.
Well, before my father passed away, one of the things he said to me was, we never really talked about money, did we? And kind of broke my heart. And I know he regretted that. But so I try to talk to my son about money, and it's really not easy. His dad gives him money for playing tennis, which he has a passion for. And so if he hits the ball, in one particular spot 10 times, he gets $10 or something like that. So he's been playing since he was 5 years old. So he always has money to spend. But now he's 15 years old. He has a girlfriend. And I told him I would never pay for any of his dates. So this summer he got a job, a real job, like at a summer camp teaching tennis. coaching. And so all the money that comes in is not going out like it used to, because now he wants to have some money around throughout the year so he can, pay for his dates and so forth. So his attitude has changed, about saving, so I think that's wonderful. And I really enjoyed the part about the value of money and relating it, because he's a Starbucks guy. And I mean, to me, that's really offensive, but I think, that's a good way for me to introduce, why we shouldn't, spend money that way. And the judgment, I love that. And really, I just wanted to ask you about the investment, what I could, because I did save some money for him. And I really haven't taken advantage of the compound interest. So I think I need to, I think the stock market is probably not a good place to invest right now, but the index funds.
Yeah. So if we want to talk on it briefly, so what I would wish I could say about investing, and if it wasn't limited in the book and talk about it, is that it's really complicated to stock pick. So I've tried to do this my whole life, and I've done well in real estate, and I've done okay in some of the, the stock market, but I've also been on the wrong side a lot. And so even like we mentioned Warren Buffett earlier, just with the compounding, even what he said to his estate is rather than try to pick individual stocks, buy the entire stock market. So that's where you get these index funds. And the reason is because it's really hard to pick, to stock pick. Like people who are professionals in this, they will disagree on whether the stock market's going up or down, or if it's, it's good or bad. What we all know is that over the long run, it's done well, it's performed. But in the short term, immediate, day-to-day, we don't know. So again, there's a trend towards not stock picking at all and just averaging it out entirely. And that's probably the best way to go, because even our really good stock pickers, it is almost impossible over a lifetime to beat the market. You might have like a good year, you might have a good 5 years. Some people have had a good 30 or 40 years. Those are our people who we really look up to. But then they might have like a few bad years, especially when the economy gets really weird or does something different. And then all of a sudden you see how they averaged out over the year or over a lifetime is still less than the stock market. So hitting those averages is more important. So even right now, like you're saying, like the stock market might not be a good place to invest right now. For me personally, I feel the same because interest rates are coming up. We might be going into a recession. Things are changing. That's how I feel personally, but I could be wrong. And so what works better is this idea of one, doing the entire market. So that's these index funds. And there's different index funds. You can have an index fund that in different sectors. So index fund doesn't mean the entire market. It's just that there are index funds that do consist of the entire market. So that in itself, now you're taking away all this individual risk, whether Tesla is going to go through the roof or Elon Musk is going to tweet something crazy or lose a lawsuit. All of a sudden, when you're in the entire market, it doesn't matter what one individual does. You're in the entire market. You're in the entire economy. And then when I talk about like the stock market going up or down, I don't know. So that's where this dollar cost averaging comes in. And that sounds crazy. This is where I start to lose people. But all that is basically not putting all your eggs in one basket. So you don't invest all your money at one time. You invest it over a period of time. And for most of us that are earning a salary, our money comes in that way anyway. So if every time you got your paycheck, you invested, there's going to be times when you hit the very top of the market. There's going to be times where you hit the very bottom of the market. But what's going to happen is if you're investing the whole time, it's going to average itself out. So then your return isn't the very worst return in the market because you did the absolute worst timing or the absolute best. It's going to again be this average. So you're averaging out. So all these things that average out what you're investing and how your return is will get you closer and closer to the average of the stock market without all the ups and downs. So it's not an individual stock. It's not an individual time. You're investing, over a 10-year period. a couple, twice a week, every month, and you're investing in all these stocks. So that's, as a long-term process, one of the best ways. And again, that's where like a financial advisor, you can talk about them and say like, this is what I want to do, and this is how, and this is why. And they can help point you in the right directions, or you can do it yourself and look into it. But again, all these things, I know there's people who are listening, they're like, too much, David, that's too much. And that's why I really try to emphasize, if you don't like what I just said, find someone who can help you. If you do like what I just said, well, then you can start looking into index funds and how do I do it myself, and open up a self-directed account. What is dollar cost averaging? You can get into the weeds. But my guess is there's less than 5% of the people on this call in the world that want to do that. So if you don't know the answer to what those questions, it doesn't matter. Just save, find someone to help you invest, and go that way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. So David, for those that want to get the book, where do they go? How do they connect with you?
Yeah, so I try to connect everything through my website, theawesomestuff.com. So that's the easiest way to find me, is theawesomestuff.com. You can order the book directly through there and find it. But at the same time, if you go to Amazon, it'll be there. If you go to a bookstore and request it, they should be able to get it in, because the distributor is linked to all the major networks. So bookstores can get it, libraries can get it, schools can get it. So all those ways are possible, or you can just buy it directly through theawesomestuff.com.
Amazing. David, it has been such an honor to have you on this call today. There's so many comments in the chat to say how awesome this is. I mean, this is life-changing, David. Like, this is not just, I believe this is healing such a huge generational pattern around lack and scarcity and safety and security, right? So really, really appreciate you making the time and answering the questions. And, for those of you that are part of my audience, if you want David back, we might even ask you to come back and elaborate some more on creating healthy habits in families around money.
I'd love that. And the thing is, this wasn't meant to be my passion. This is just,
Yeah.
as I've seen it evolve, I'm like, wow, like there's a real need to get this going. So
Yeah.
I love that. And if anyone wants to reach out, they can reach out directly through the website, theawesomestuff.com, or the book's called The Golden Quest, so author@thegoldenquest.com. You can reach me. And if you want to get into your community or have me do a talk, I'd love to be back here, or into schools. I mean, really, my goal is trying to change this generation of kids, so they're thinking this way. And it's a bit of a fight against what we're seeing right now with consumerism, what's happening with the metaverse, what's happening with social media. Like, this is a way to sort of hold back that force that's pushing everything towards, sizzle over steak, or, basically, perception over what's really real. And it's important, like you said, like your son, why'd you want this TV? Because everyone else did. I mean, that just crushes me. And so, and that's why this whole concept is so important to me, to sort of get that message out.
Yeah. The competing with the Joneses, I mean, that's huge. And he's 6, and he basically said, I want this TV because I'm embarrassed when our friends come over and they see our really old TV. So then just reading this with him, having him understand the awesome stuff, it literally liberated him. So please do get this book for kids. Like, please, please, please. David, loved having you on. Everyone who asked questions, thank you so much for the powerful questions. And hopefully we'll see you soon, David.
Thanks so much. I love this, and anytime.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Yummii. Bye-bye.